Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs and to another episode of Blockbuster, where we bring in my friend John Rogers, former Disney exec, to talk about all things entertainment and blockchain. And today is part 3 of what is actually going to be a 4-part series, talking about different parts of the entertainment value chain and blockchain. The 3 parts here are development, production, and distribution. So we started by doing an episode looking at how blockchain and NFTs could be involved in the development process for film and TV. And then we looked at how it could be involved in production. And today is part 1 of the distribution side of things. So we're going to get a little bit into how John sees film and TV leveraging blockchain as part of the distribution process. Next time, we'll dive into that even further, looking at like licensing deals and merchandise, because there's a whole long tail to distribution that is all of that stuff. But there was a lot to cover, so we're going to do that next time. So today we get into some of the news stories that John is tracking that John thinks is interesting, that we all should be following if you're interested in this space. And then we talk about how blockchain can be used in film distribution. And a couple of other notes before we get started, administrative notes before we dive into the episode. The Friday Overpriced happy hour is going to be rescheduled. I've been tweeting about this. Our guest was supposed to be Betty from Deadfellas. Betty had an unexpected family emergency and had to head back to Australia. So we were talking to a number of different folks about potentially different guests to get in for this Friday. But the truth is, it was just too last minute to try and coordinate something, especially with the 4th of July holiday that we just had. So we will be rescheduling it, hopefully just to next week. But a couple balls in the air there. I just want to make sure that we can put on the best event possible for everyone who is in LA and coming to that. So in order to make sure that we can make it super strong, we are going to reschedule. I will put out more information about that as soon as I have it. Thank you all so much for your flexibility and understanding. Sending Betty lots of love, and I will keep y'all posted. And now we do need to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors who make this show possible before we dive into my conversation with John Rogers. Y'all know I think one of the most powerful use cases for NFTs are loyalty programs, which is why I'm so excited about our latest partner, GALXE. That's GALXE. GALXE is a leading platform for building a Web3 community. It is a no-code, plug-and-play solution to create task-based campaigns and loyalty programs. With over 67 million users, GALXE has worked with folks like Optimism, Polygon, Arbitrum, and more than 2,100 other partners with reward-based loyalty programs of their own. And I'm especially excited to announce their latest product offering, GALXE Mint List. Mint List enables NFT projects to issue allow lists based on different user profiles. It's free to use, and projects can then take advantage of GALXE's other offerings, like Task and Quest, which incentivize audience growth and user retention in the long term. Go beyond the mint and keep using GALXE's infrastructure to reward users through on and off-chain actions. GALXE's goal is to help projects grow in an authentic way and help them retain their users and communities over the long haul. And as a user, you can start contributing to your favorite Web3 communities today, joining allow lists through Mint List and earning rewards, NFTs, oats, tokens, and points. Go to galaxy.com right now, that's GALXE.com right now, or click the link in the show notes to get started. Your Web3 community is waiting. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copy mint protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OPENSEA. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OPENSEA right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Hello, John. Welcome back. Another episode of Blockbuster.
And now, on with the show. Hello, Carly. Hello, everyone. I think we're on episode 5 of the
Five?
Blockbuster series.
We lost count somewhere there because we did that bonus episode. We
Yeah.
also were pretty good about doing these once a month, but they're not like necessarily always the same week of the month. Like we had one early in the month in May, and now we're late in the month on June. So we like to keep the public on their toes.
Yeah. And I know you just got back from vacation because you said hello and not GM.
Oh, that's true. I wasn't even technically on vacation, but I was home with my family and took that time to like decompress a little bit. So I ended up being an unplanned vacation in some ways.
So GM Carly.
GM John, yes. Well, let's dive into the topics du jour that we want to talk about, and then we'll get into this broader piece around distribution and NFTs as we can continue along on our like value chain and the blockchain when it comes to entertainment series. The first tidbit of news that I don't know how much people are tracking this or not is this Nouns movie. Part 1 of this Nouns movie has been released.
No one is better than anyone else. Everyone here has a part to play.
Remind me who the animation studio behind this is.
Yeah, it's Atrium. And Atrium is a really cool collective of artists. So as a collective, what it means is if they get a commission for a project, Non-Fungible Films is one of their big clients. They've done multiple projects for them. They will assemble, say, the right skill set for this role, the right person with the skill set for this role out of the collective, and say maybe 5 members of the collective are working on the project, the others are on the sideline. And then the next project, they'll bring the next group in and kind of work that way. What I love about our Atrium, and we've seen this with this Nouns movie, I think they call it Rise of Blues, is that they just do amazing quality work. And the rates are, they would blow any kind of real like Pixar kind of studio out of the water.
In terms of when you say rates, you're talking about it's way more affordable to make it this way than a Pixar.
Yes, exactly. And they're for Web3 projects or even small teams that aren't even Web3, just that are looking to create some short animation for a variety of different purposes, they would be a great group to talk to.
So I want to take a step back. So first of all, we should say that this is something that was funded by Nouns DAO. This clearly was a proposal that was put forward to Nouns DAO. They voted to allocate some amount of funding to it. I recently just had an experience with Nouns Builder, which is, I never know how to phrase this. Like it's an offshoot of Nouns. I mean, Nouns basically open source, and you were talking to me about this. Nouns open sourced their infrastructure around building DAOs, and that was like Nouns Builder, and now Nouns Builder is also a DAO, and they have a 24-hour, they have a daily NFT drop, and the Nouns Builders also have their own treasury, and so they actually voted to sponsor the next Overpriced Happy Hour event that's happening in Los Angeles. So I'm a big fan of Nouns Builders these days, but honestly, like it really was impressive to watch their process, and everybody who I respect in this space really is such a fan of Nouns. And, I've been a fan of Nouns too, but I feel like there's a whole cohort of people who I think are really smart, who have really pointed to Nouns as something really unique, yourself included. Yeah. And so this is a really interesting example of it being put to work.
Exactly. So this was funded with Proposal 245, and anyone can go look at the Nouns website and see the proposals. So number 245 if you're interested. And by the way, going through and looking at the different proposals and what gets funded and what doesn't is really just, I think, a great learning experience for anyone who's interested in the space, just to kind of get caught up. I am, as you said, a huge fan of the Nouns. I own, full disclosure, multiple little Nouns and multiple NARs and multiple Bonies. I do not own any Nouns directly. I can't afford that. I have kids in school. But I still get to participate in the community through those derivative projects, all of which, other than maybe Bonies, all of which came to market through the Nouns Builder tool sets.
By the way, I was told that it was the founder of NARS, which is an example of a project that has been built out of Nouns Builder, used that infrastructure, and it is a project supporting extreme sports. The NARS founder is the person who put me over the edge, who put our proposal over the edge to fund our event. So whoever the founder of NARS is has a bunch of noun builders. Gammy. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Gammy. Gammy has a several noun builder NFTs and voted to sponsor the OPJ event, and so that's why we passed. So shout out there.
Well, thank you, Nouns.
Nars.
So talk and Mars.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what this proposal that got funded in the movie. So it was voted as a proposal for $125,000 for a first chapter of what, with subsequent funding rounds, could become a film, a movie. So each chapter is supposed to be about 3.5 minutes long, give or take a little bit. And it's essentially kind of saying, okay, with proof of the first one being successful, then we'll fund the second chapter, then the third chapter. And if they got to 7 or 8 of them in total, then they have enough content to cut it together into like a full, I'll call it feature-length story.
Okay, so this part 1 has now come out. It's, to your point, probably about 3.5 minutes. So that $125,000 that was funded was to just pay for this 3.5 minutes of this first 3.5 minutes of content.
Yep, and that included, it's a little bit high from what Atrium would normally do, but a lot of that's infrastructure. So they're getting a lot of that core base infrastructure in place with that. And then you get more minutes of animation with subsequent funding rounds.
And in something like this, when you're talking about what that core infrastructure is, it's getting the look of the characters. It's how do they move? It's their, like, I forget the terms, right? But there's different ways to create an animation. But once you have certain core movements and the look of the character built, it's composable, right? Like you can reuse kind of those frames throughout the film, but there's an initial cost to get all of the base looks and feels and everything established.
Exactly.
Before you build on top of it.
And animating a noun is not the easiest thing to do because you've got one with a head that's a piano or one that has a head that's a fox. And so there are some creative challenges to work through with animating a noun. But
well, what's cool, and obviously this is something that's been commented on with Nouns a number of times, right, is the glasses are in some ways the core noun look, and that's that core signal that you can recognize. It's their Nike swoosh, and the integration of the glasses are really cool throughout this just 3.5 minute short. So I hear that and I'm like, $125,000 does sound like a lot of money to produce a 3.5 minute short. What would Pixar pay for something like this, or what would it cost Pixar to do something?
3.5 minutes. $2 million a minute.
$2 million per minute.
Yeah. And that's accounting for, it costs more for the early minutes because of all the infrastructure and setup.
Yeah.
And later minutes would be less expensive. But yeah.
Why?
Pixar movie, let's just say Pixar movie's 90 minutes long. Usually they run a little bit longer. They should be 90 minutes, but that's a separate conversation for another day. That's about a $250 million investment. And this is kind of going back full circle to where we started with the problem. One of the problems in Hollywood is the financial opportunities in Hollywood do not justify the costs of production anymore.
So that's what I was going to ask. What do these movies make at this point what does a big Pixar movie make in the box office?
You don't want to look at the box office for the current movie that's out. It's Elements, maybe, or
I don't even know.
I can't remember. I saw it in the theater with my daughter because we had a rainy day. And I don't even remember what it was called. So here's kind of look at the model. So Pixar movie, $250 million for 100 minutes of content. A Illumination movie, who's part of Universal and does the Minions, can do that for 60% of that number. And yet the Minions movies are making close to $1 billion at box office. I wouldn't be surprised if they broke $1 billion in the last one or two. And so you can do $1 billion in box office. And if in that case, you can justify that cost. But the last 2 or 3 Pixar movies have all failed to break $200 or $300 million. Buzz Lightyear movie came out last year and didn't perform. This year's movie didn't perform. And so there's a bigger question of the cost of animation and the quality you get for it versus what the consumer and the audience are expecting. And so when I look at a studio like Atrium, it's not Pixar quality. We know that. But is it good enough for consumers for almost all applications and uses? And the answer is yes.
Let me stay on this for 1 minute more, and then I want to talk about my impressions of this film, this very short film, this 3.5 minute film. But so you made the comparison, like the Universal versus Pixar. But Minions, it makes sense that Minions makes a lot of money. It's a known franchise. It's everything we talk about. It's doubling down. It's one of the rare cases where you have an existing franchise that's really, really, really working. You keep saying, like, you're not going to find another Harry Potter. There's a reason they're making now a Harry Potter TV show. They're just milking this known IP for all they can because they know it's going to work. So when you make that comparison, is Universal in general? Are they universally just better at making cheaper content that does better? Or specifically, they have something really good with Minions that's like their one thing that's outperforming Pixar?
Strip away what we see as the consumer, as the audience. We see characters and story and music. If you strip that away and just look at the process that was underneath it to create that content, a lot of that is the creative storytelling. Is it a good story, good characters, good music? That's part of the experience. That's what makes it subjective and good. But the objective part of how much did it cost to make this and bring this to market? When you look at that, Illumination, the studio owned by Universal, has what is now clearly looks like a better model.
Got it.
I mean, you can't. The Pixar model is focused on such fine quality, focus on quality, things that consumers and audiences would never even see. You'll never even notice. Now they'll say, well, the filmmaker knows. And that as a filmmaker-led studio, and this is always really big with Pixar, we are a filmmaker-led studio, meaning the suits don't have a say. But at Illumination, which is still a filmmaker-led studio, but founded by the producer, Chris Meledandri, and still led by Chris, it also has a little bit of a business focus, which is we want to do what we can, but we also want to have a realistic focus as to what the cost is versus what the consumer expectations are. I think they found the better place to be.
It's funny because I've heard Iger talk about how Pixar was such a better process than Disney was when they first acquired Pixar. And so Disney had reoriented a bunch of what they did around the Pixar model because that had been an improvement at the time. But I mean, everything, not that it's been
a lot of
this
that
has happened that quickly, but it's funny now,
And I was there when that, and I was there when that happened, and was in a lot of I wasn't in the deal making part of it, but I was in a lot of the meetings after for post merger integration, and a lot of that was really around taking business suits out of creative decisions. So they weren't going to have a marketing person say, you need to make this scene so I can make a trailer, and have to have a scene in the movie doesn't make sense. So that was a lot of the benefit of Pixar. Okay, we're going to strip away the outside influence and let creatives be purely creative. And we're going to let them have breathing room. So you're not going to have to put in, if we're running up short on a timeline or a deadline, and the creative needs more time, we're going to let it breathe. We're not going to just force it out because we have to hit a deadline.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's talk about this rise of Blues. We don't know how to pronounce it, but it's B-L-U-S. I think they say it in the film, but of course I can't remember. Let's call it Blues. I was really impressed. I really went in with not a lot of expectations. You sent me the link and I was like, we hadn't really talked about it yet. So I was like, I'm just going to watch this and see. And what it really, as I was watching it, what it really reminded me of was Miyazaki, the I guess, anime filmmaker. I mean, I watched Spirited Away so many times as a kid. I thought of Castle in the Sky in particular because the movie takes place in this city community in the sky. And so it had that feel to me, which is it's not the same kind of polish as a Pixar, but it doesn't feel like lower quality to me because it just feels like stylistically different. That was what it felt like to me. Yeah, and style is the right word. So there's every animator on every movie, every project, every short has to figure out what's the style they want. You always want to have a very unique and ownable style. And sometimes a filmmaker like Miyazaki might have a kind of unique style that's theirs as an artist. Sometimes you have a studio style. Like Pixar definitely has a studio style where many different movies, different genre, even kind of different genres in some cases, but they all have a kind of a consistent Pixar look. Illumination also has that a little bit to a lesser degree. They have a unique look. DreamWorks did that. So there are studio styles. But I think what really makes a project successful for an audience is to really have a strong creative point of view on the style. Yeah. And to really trust that as on the business side, really trust that they're going to get that right. Well, it's a brand identity, which is, something I've become more attuned with just being in this space. Recent Azuki missteps and fumbles aside, the thing that was always intriguing about Azuki was a really clear brand identity, look, feel. The website fed into that. It's what made Goblin Town so special when it came out, was this really clear branded identity. And this is it's in the same family that we're talking about, like a clear visual identity, style, feel to any creative project, I think is so important and something I've learned to value so much being in this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you might even see this like on a number of the Web3 projects. They might have an artist who worked on commission and has worked on multiple projects. And so you might see a unique style to that artist across different kinds of Web3 projects, but it was that artist that they worked with on each one.
Well, it's awesome. Folks should check it out. I mean, it's easy. It's nouns.movie. You can go to see the first installment of this. And it's 3.5 minutes. It's easy to watch. What are the next steps here, John, in terms of getting us to a feature-length film?
Yeah, they're going to have to come back with each of the stages, and I think there's 7 of them, for another proposal. So there'll have to be another funding proposal to the Nouns DAO.
Is it out? Is there a proposal up right now or not yet?
Not yet. I think this just came out earlier this month, so within the month of June. So probably have some time before they have results to report and lessons learned. And then they'll go back to Nouns DAO to get proposal 2 funded, which I believe I do know because I'm looking at it right now. Proposal 2 is for 10 more minutes of runtime of content for a cost of $375,000. So they're bringing that down to $37,000 a minute.
It does still sound so high. I mean, it's such a cohesive experience because you also have music as part of this. And the music here is really beautiful and dovetails really well and creates a mood. And again, also gave me a little bit of that Miyazaki vibe. So, I mean, like, I'm rooting for this team. I think this is really cool what they're doing. I think it's quality and the story is cute. Like, I think I would maybe quibble a little bit on some of the writing because I can be kind of picky about that. But in general, I thought it was really well done. So people should go check it out. Nouns.movie. Okay, next bit of news here. Do you want to talk about Roy Price tweets or do you want to talk about the movie starring the Bored Ape or including the Bored Ape?
Let's go to the Bored Ape first. We'll finish with Roy Price.
We'll finish with Roy Price. Okay, so there's this announcement again earlier this month, early June. Obviously didn't make much of a splash. Nobody that I saw was really talking about this, but it's relevant to what we're trying to track here, which is everything related to content, IP, entertainment, and NFTs. There is Bored Ape number 2758 is making his film debut, or her, I don't know if it's gendered, but he's making a film debut. Say it again.
They're making their
film debut. In this movie, what's the name of the movie? I'm trying to look here.
I don't think it's titled yet.
Okay, it doesn't have a title. That's
untitled movie.
It's directed by J.M. Craviotto, who directed several episodes of El Chapo, which was a series on Netflix, and the character is going to play this ape is going to play a social media influencer and like hotshot who throws a party at his house. That is the information we have. What were your takeaways from this story? I know you can dive us a little deeper into some of what's happening here.
Well, what caught my attention, I mean, there've been a lot of announcements around Bored Apes and other Web3 characters kind of being licensed for use in a show or content. So that wasn't what caught my eye on this. What caught my eye was that the way they announced this is that the ape, the NFT, got a deal that is quote unquote SAG equivalent. Now, SAG means Screen Actors Guild is an acronym, SAG, Screen Actors Guild equivalent deal. And so it's not a SAG deal because it's not a live human being, but they're going to pay for this character as if it was a live human being and give them entitlement, maybe options, rights, that a SAG actor would get in a film deal. And
what do pets get when they're in movies?
Nothing.
Is this like
nothing?
Like the owner doesn't get anything?
I own. Do you know this? I own the dog that starred in the Super Buddies movie for Disney.
I don't know this.
Yeah. I have a golden retriever named Kona, who I adopted. This is one of the things about working at Disney that when we had a dog, Super Buddies had 9 dogs.
I'm looking this up.
And employees were given the chance to adopt the dog at the end of the movie, with certain stipulations that you have to sign up, kind of agree to. And so I adopted a golden retriever named Kona, who played a character in the movie named Mudbud. And she was, dirty secret is all the characters are female dogs, because they're smarter.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Like, even though she played a male character in the show, she is a female dog. And
that's funny. Oh my gosh, so cute. I'm looking at the Super Buddies. All of these dogs are so cute. And you don't get anything. So they don't, but even if like, so there's, it's just a vanity, not like, in a negative way, but it's
All they did is they went to a breeder. They acquired the dogs from a breeder, all from one litter. So they're all brothers and sisters. And they trained them. So very basic, simple training, but enough to kind of work on screen. And after the dogs were done working, they put them up for adoption.
Okay, so this Bored Ape is being treated better than the puppies will, which is interesting. Here's where I'm skeptical. So the owner of this ape is Rzubi.eth, RZUBI.eth, who is also an executive producer at the production company that is putting on this film.
There does appear to be a little self-dealing there.
Yeah. And the director, J.M. Craviotto, it also is like has a meaningful like stake. It seems like to be like their production company essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Not that necessarily has any bearing because it's not as if he owns this ape, but I'm like, okay, you gave this ape a really good deal, but it's your company essentially.
Here's what I want to focus on. Put aside all of the questions of self-dealing. Those are fair questions, but things I don't care about for right now. What's interesting to me is you have a PFP, an avatar for a person's social presence that is getting a SAG equivalent deal. Mm-hmm. And what that brings up is a question. In the future, as you see more social influencers get integrated into big shows and content, if those creators are undoxed and they are hidden behind that character, but that character is presenting themselves as a celebrity in the show, should they not get a SAG deal? Should SAG be forward thinking about digital characters representing real people if they're in content?
Yeah, that's interesting. Not that anybody cares, not that SAG cares what my opinion is, but there does seem to be an important distinction between I am a real human who uses a digital avatar as my presentation of self, and here is a digital avatar that is just owned by an individual who doesn't present as that avatar. Or right? Like this is just a digital avatar that is a completely inanimate thing that is owned by somebody. Now, I still think there's something to be said there, right? If you own the IP that is being brought to life in a film in a meaningful way, clearly you should have some sort of stake in that. I keep joking, like let's give all the stage moms NFTs and keep them away from living human girls, or boys. But I feel like girls get it the worst,
Yeah. Well, I think there's kind of two sides of this coin, which is one is absolutely, if you own a piece of intellectual property, you should be able to, if you have the rights, you should be able to license it for use in content and participate in that. But then the other is do you treat an inanimate character like a human in terms of the deal it gets?
Yeah, well, isn't part of the benefits? If the question is around money, I think that's interesting. SAG actors have to be paid a certain amount, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that it makes sense necessarily to give the ape that money because it's not doing anything. It's not putting in those same days of work, et cetera.
But what if that ape is animated? What if that ape is giving a performance in the show?
Animator should get the money then.
But what if that ape is me? Like, you don't know me. Say I'm undoxed. You don't know me. Mm-hmm. You only know me as my ape. I wish I owned an ape. I do not, it's full disclosure. But it's my ape. I'm being animated as me, the social celebrity influencer person in the show. It's me. It's my ape. I should get. Are you doing
the voice? Like, to me, it's about work, right? To me, it's about compensation for work. So it's not Brad Pitt, who is both Brad Pitt, the character in the sense that he's so famous that he is a caricature to some people. It's almost not real. In addition to Brad Pitt putting in days of actual labor himself working on a film set, should be paid more to me than an ape who, let's say, checkbox that part one, is a character, just like Brad Pitt is sort of a character in the fame sense, let's say, but is not actually putting in days of work acting. Whoever is making that ape come to life should be compensated for that work. That would be my feeling.
Okay. Now think like on DreamWorks was famous for overpaying for voice talent. So Cameron Diaz, Eddie Murphy on Shrek, $10 million paydays for essentially what turned into like 2 or 3 days of work to do voice acting. Oh yeah, it was that crazy. So imagine, okay,
I mean, Eddie Murphy's great in that character.
They're all amazing, and you could argue the voice makes the character. So different argument for different time. But think, okay, I put in 2 days of work. I got my $10 million for my voice, but all of a sudden, it's not just my voice. It's also my ape. It's by Eddie Murphy the donkey. It's my donkey. I'm the ass here. So, it's my voice. It's my donkey. It's me. It's how everyone knows me in the world. And only way that people other than my family know me in the world is as this donkey. Shouldn't I get the SAG deal on that?
What is a SAG deal? I guess maybe I don't know enough about a SAG deal. My answer is like no. Well,
a SAG deal is there's a minimum wage. So, forget the Eddie Murphy $10 million. Like, this is minimum wage. Like, and by minimum wage, it's a couple $1,000s a day, perhaps, or even less, depending upon a lot of factors. So it's a minimum wage. It's basically credits towards your health insurance if you have a SAG health policy, credits towards keeping your membership in SAG. So you have to work a certain amount of SAG certified shows to kind of qualify for all of the SAG benefits. And then it's all of the other kind of ancillary kind of opportunities that they offer to their members, training, things like that.
But this is the question, right? Like, so the training goes to who in this case?
Well, it would go to the human being behind the character, say for voice acting. So do you want to take free training or support for voice acting? Because you're really a voice actor in this case. The difference is being a voice actor on a show like The Simpsons, where, say, Marge Simpson, the actor doesn't own the character. That actress is paid. She comes in, she does her reads.
But voice actors can be a part of SAG, correct?
Correct. So they can be a part of SAG, but what is the deal for being more than the voice actor, that you are the character?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think there's something that's really novel about this idea that hasn't been explored, of what happens when the character is it's a digital representation of the real life person, and it's creating a performance.
Yeah.
It feels more than just a voice acting deal.
Yes, but there's also more people than just one going into that work, right? Unless you're also the animator of that character. I mean, I guess it's interesting if you think about like what Women and Weapons are doing with Nova, which is Sarah Bauman is suiting up every day in a haptic suit and acting out this character that's ultimately rendered digitally, but she's also there's physicality for that involved in that for her. This is where I become this free market capitalist where I'm like, well, look, if they really want that character and you own that character, then sure, like leverage the shit out of that and get whatever deal you can get. Where I get like tripped up a little bit, and I talked to Luca from Pudgies about this at one point, is like, because he's obviously doing all the licensing deals and he's trying to get holders rewarded if their Pudgy blows up on social media. And one of the things that's tricky to me is those Pudgies are interchangeable in their social media content right now, right? The 10,000 Pudgies all look, or whatever it is. Are they 888 or 10? I can't remember how many Pudgies
I think they're 888. I
think they are too, but I don't know if I'm right on that. In any case, point being, like, they're interchangeable. Like, if you have a social media post that goes viral, you could have easily put any of the Pudgies in there and it would have done just as well. Like, it has nothing to do with that particular Pudgy. So, like, how much value are you really creating as that Pudgy? So that's my thing with these apes as well. I imagine in, like, any sort of content perspective right now, they would be fairly interchangeable. You're getting to a bigger picture thing, which is like, if down the line, like, there is one particular character or look that's like built up enough of a following or has enough of a story that this person has poured themselves into, in which case, yeah, I don't know, get your SAG deal, get whatever, leverage the shit out of that if your character is the one they want.
It's coming to this point of virtual influencers are on the rise. We've seen them. There'll be more of them. What we haven't really seen yet is a virtual influencer emerge out of an NFT project, but I think that has to happen at some point. And what happens when that does? And are the traditional Hollywood mechanisms for dealing with talent equipped to handle a virtual influencer? And I don't think
these agencies are starting to rep them.
They are.
Right?
They are. Indeed, they are.
The CAA reps Jenkins.
CAA, WME, I think all three of the big ones are definitely in the space. UTA I'm not so sure about, but I definitely know CAA and WME are.
I don't know. It boggles my mind a little bit because it takes more of a village to create one of these virtual influencers, because you do need to have somebody who's animating it and bringing it to life, and then you need somebody who's acting it out, and then you have the person who owns it. I mean, in some ways, it feels like it will come to reflect some sort of traditional model in the sense that we do have those dynamics at play, right? You have an animator for something, you have somebody who owns the IP for it, you have somebody who voices the thing. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, it's fight for yourself, artists.
Yeah, it's kind of theoretical right now, but I don't think we're too far down, year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, down the road for when it actually becomes a real challenge. And that's kind of what we're here for, is watching how do traditional Hollywood institutions respond to the emergence of blockchain-based IP and opportunities, and they are not ready. I guess that's our general other sub-theme. How does Hollywood respond to IP in Web3? They're not ready.
They're not classing with flying colors. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about. Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see, with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. Okay, well, actually, this is a perfect segue to our last bit of news here, which is segueing to somebody who was in the traditional, let's call it, I don't want to say traditional studio system. It was the former head of Amazon Studios, which I guess is traditional now, but it's not traditional in the sense of like, Disney, Universal, the old world studios. Roy Price, who was previously the head of Amazon Studios, has been tweeting lately, and I know you've appreciated some of his tweets, especially coming from him, who's been in the more traditional world with all this stuff. Tell me about his tweets. What jumped out at you? What are you watching? Yeah.
So he has there's 2 tweets in particular that have caught my attention in the last 10 days. And he's kind of, he tweets about a lot of different things. If you follow his Twitter feed, he's kind of interested in a lot of areas of Web3. But these 2 tweets in particular, one is kind of related to a topic we spoke about the last 2 podcasts of Blockbuster. And I just want to kind of bring it up. And this was a tweet from June 15th, where he was talking about how this model of development, so we're in this area where development oversits and kind of gets wishy-washy with distribution, but how a new model of development is possible and emerging that I'm a strong believer and advocate of, which is you can't just go find the next Harry Potter anymore. A, because the next Harry Potter isn't on shelves currently. And when that next Harry Potter comes along, God help you and your checkbook when that bidding war begins, because, and all Godspeed and congratulations to the writer for that deal you're going to get. You just can't rely on
and
that.
may she be a woman. No, I'm just kidding.
It's the moral story is like big IP with a pre-existing fan base, huge awareness, just doesn't, it's already all been picked over and acquired and sliced and diced. And so you need to look for new sources of IP. And that's why one of the things I'm excited about with Web3 is because it creates opportunities for storytellers, and not just those in Hollywood, but those sitting in a dorm room in Des Moines, Iowa, my favorite example, or Erie, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and who aspire to be that. You now have tools and methods to help get seen, get heard. And so what he's advocating here is you can invest as a studio, you can invest in IP and take small kind of stepped risks or chances. So, hey, we really believe what this writer in Erie, Pennsylvania is doing. We want to acquire the rights. I'm just going to keep throwing out Erie, Pennsylvania. I love saying it. We're going to keep acquire the rights, and we're going to invest a little bit in some animatics. And then, all right, well, I got some attention and we got some fans. Now we're going to invest a little bit more in some more written long form stories. And all right, that really grew the fan base. And we're going to keep stepping it up. And eventually you can make more confident decisions in big investments in IP. And so you could do this without Web3, but what Web3 really helps is it becomes that glue of a community to hold them together, to give them equity even in participation. Now there's some challenges around that, but that's SEC domain, but there's opportunities to give them participation in that. And what you're doing is you're building that fan base slowly and organically over time to eventually create an army. And that army, when the project comes along and it's going to become a feature film, say 10, 15 years down the road, you now have an army that you can send out to be your advocates in the world. And of course, word of mouth marketing is the strongest form there is. So he's very much following the same model that I was thinking of for a future development approach.
So we're going to get into the back half of what you just said. That's in one of your big theses around distribution in Web3. You had a line, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was around in traditional media. Why don't you say it? Traditional media value comes from distribution or something. But
yeah, it's something along the lines of in traditional media, value is created through distribution. In the future of media, value is created from community. And so what that means is that distribution would have been, hey, I got a movie and we need to get it in 3,000 cinemas. And you know what? If we could get it in 4,000 cinemas, that's even better because that's more broader distribution and more screens and more eyeballs, which means more dollars in the bank account. But what we've seen with like all of the different forms of media, just it's monetizing differently. Not as the traditional model of just put it in 4,000 cinemas isn't working. Take a look at this year's box office. Everyone was screaming from the rafters, box office is back, the movies are back. And now what? They are not. The only bright spot this summer is the Spider-Man movie. And even that, if you look at pre-pandemic comps, is not particularly exciting in terms of the performance. So there's got to be a new approach, a new way to think about how content is monetized and where that value is driven from. And what Hollywood has really been horrible at traditionally is really building community. Yes, they can market and get people to show up with $100 million ad spend. But other than Star Wars, perhaps, they've been really bad at building that fan base and holding that fan base with some support. And so this is just saying, okay, now we need to really get serious about building a community of fans and equipping them to be our best advocates and to go out and argue and help us and fight for us.
And that's what you feel like Roy Price is saying, which is really interesting coming from somebody who has run Amazon Studios before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key. The key part is that this is someone who ran a studio. This wasn't like me as the lowly franchise guy or a marketing strategy guy. This is like the head of the studio saying, you know what? This is the model of the future.
It's interesting though, because in some ways it's all distribution, right? You're talking about shifting methods for distribution. Obviously, the theater problem is a problem, and who knows if theaters will ever really be able to come back to what they once were. Probably not, because the temptation to sit at home and order food and pull something up on your TV is just mighty high, I might say. As somebody who, I go to Alamo theaters, that's an Alamo Draft House. I don't know if folks are familiar with Alamo Draft House, but they'll bring you food, they'll bring you booze. You can sit there in your seats and have like a whole, fancier experience like that. If I go to the movies, that tends to be what I do now, which is one way to try and get more butts in seats. It's like, well, offer me like, alcoholic beverages and more than just popcorn. I'm getting a little mini pizza.
You get engaged and you're ready to start nesting. Is that what this is?
I have always been ready to nest. To be clear, I was nesting long before I even met my husband, and just thank God that I somehow found him, so that I had somebody else now to nest with.
Yeah, and we're not talking about moonbirds nesting either.
Yeah. No, not that kind of nesting. So there's a question of like, okay, do theaters come back? And to your point of like, it's not enough now just to have a movie that's going to enter the theaters. That's not guarantee. You were saying it's also the case for these streaming services, right? Just because something's on Netflix doesn't necessarily mean it'll do well. Is that partly because there's just too much content out there?
I think there's a couple factors. There's definitely too much content for just to capture anyone's attention. It's part of the argument why franchises work, because they're differentiated brands. You can have a fan base. And so it's kind of like, okay, Iger's talked about differentiated brands when he came back to Disney just a couple months ago, and yet they start cutting departments that would be building community building elements to build on support those brands. So there's that element. But the other is really that these differentiated brands just can't cut through the clutter as well as they did, and that's where you need to have a fan base. You need to have, I'll use fan base and community interspersed here, but you need to have that core group of advocates. It doesn't have to be 1 million people. It can be a couple thousand and still get a message through.
So this is my core critique or question to the idea that like fundamentally distribution of content is going to change towards Web3 because you need to have this army of fans, and that's what Web3 creates. I don't know if we can get scale. Like can, this is what I hear from, again, to reference Women in Weapons, like you have these meetings with these Hollywood studios and they're just unimpressed by having 5,000 holders. Now, again, we're trying to criticize the studios and say they don't understand it. So maybe I'm just wrong, but like, can NFTs, will enough people really buy into the NFT before they've seen the movie? Like, to me, it feels like the army comes from loving the story itself, not because they're going to buy a piece of art way in advance and then show up to the theater.
There's really I think of this like from two perspectives. One is you're not going to say, hey, look at our NFTs and come buy an NFT. And it's really more abstracted away. And if you want to know about the tech that's underneath this, we're happy to share that and you can learn about it. And hopefully you will actually want to learn about that because that helps the space overall. But if not, you can participate in this community and you don't need to know how it's kind of held together and operated. The other part is the nature of how studios share information. One of the things that happens in modern Hollywood, and this has been at least since 20, 25 years ago, is every element and detail about a movie, let's just say an upcoming Marvel movie, is carefully choreographed. Every image that you see, every first look, every script plot point, you would be amazed at how many people are involved in deciding what like a 3-sentence log line says to describe a movie that you read a description in, say, a magazine, or what that first look picture looks like when you see that published online. Like, you can't believe how many people are involved in that process and how choreographed it is. And the problem is that that's built on a kind of a belief that the consumer shouldn't know, that we should keep the surprise for the screen. And there's an element of truth and importance to that. But that they also can't be trusted. That if we have a community of fans that we want to kind of let in the gates and show them some stuff, they can't be trusted with that. And what I believe is fundamentally broken is that view of your audience and your consumer, that they can't be trusted. They have to be held at arm's length. That's why there's no real fan clubs and real fan activation groups in Hollywood outside of the Star Wars fan team.
And wasn't like George Lucas pretty antagonistic towards his fans for a while? That's
the public perception, and maybe in the early days that was that way, particularly when the fan films started arriving. But I think over time, certainly when I was there, I saw that he had come to accept that the fans were a part of it and had certain expectations. So he was a little bit better at it than I think most people account for. But what I'm saying is that their studios are going to have to share more than they've ever shared before.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's create a core army's the wrong word, but a core army of fans who will become our brand advocates. We're going to share information with them. We're going to let them in the process. We're going to let them watch as the movie's being created. And they'll hopefully have some engagement and investment in the IP as a result. And if you can tokenize that, now you're giving them all the better. And that's where I think this opportunity is to create these communities around supported with like a Web3 element, like a token that brings them together and then equips them to be your advocate.
It feels like it's almost a two-step process, because first it's this cultural shift that needs to happen within Hollywood that even says, hey, this is how it should be. We should let people in to the process. And I think that first shift is one that happens on social media, because when we talk about like letting people into behind the scenes, like where's that being shared? Well, naturally, maybe if it's tokenized, but I think that's actually step 2 of all this. Maybe it's a Discord, which I still think you argue is a social media platform, right? So it's like, first figure out how to frickin' use social media to distribute this behind the scenes content and start letting people in. And by the way, 100%, because behind the scenes content on things and like the how do people do what they do is actually my favorite kind of content. Like, I am not somebody who watches YouTubers ever, but I used to watch Lily Singh would do these vlogs about like what she would do in a day to build her brand. I never watched her YouTube videos, but I would watch her behind the scenes content about like what her daily schedule was. And so I think that no doubt would be, if you could make that content well, that would be awesome. It's like a day in the life of a Google engineer, a day in the life of a chef for a rich family in the Hamptons. Like this content is really popular on TikTok. So capturing that in the process of a movie would be, I totally agree, go a long way in terms of driving up interest for the film. Like, how much would I'm already excited for the Barbie movie, but how awesome would it be if I'd gotten to see elements of Margot Robbie or Greta Gerwig, what's her name? What's the director's name?
Greta Gerwig.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And Ryan Gosling, like behind the scenes. Anyway, so I'm totally with that. But that feels like that's one step of just like rewiring brains and thinking and learning. And I feel like we almost have to get there. And then step 2 can be, we're ready for the tokenized component of it and the NFT component of it. I do think that it's, I think the actual ownership piece is so huge, but we're literally legally not there. And without that ownership piece, it is a little bit murkier, like what real value of that is. Yes,
we're not there, but there are teams working on that. There are legal experts at like Andreessen who are working on that. They're engaging Congress. We're going to get there. Yes, it's not there today, and I'm not saying this is going to happen today. But we're going to get there on that element. But the element that we haven't really started thinking about yet, and this is kind of pivoting our conversation a bit, but is on the actual, how do you Web3 enable the distribution of this content? And that is going to be one of the areas that's going to be really important.
So say more on that.
So think about as you're watching, let's say a trailer for the Barbie movie, and you happen to have one of those tokens because you were participating in this community. And as you're watching through maybe a special viewer, a player app that is equipped with kind of Web3 tools or capabilities, you can interact with it. So let's say Barbie's wearing an outfit that is unique to that trailer. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of costumes in that movie that are very unique and first of a kind, because those are the toys that they're going to be selling. Those will be the toys that are going to be on sale later this summer. But imagine being able to get access to those costumes for an adult that only you can have, or perhaps...
I'm dying just because I'm like, you're not wrong, but also like that's hilarious.
Or perhaps, okay, so they're the toys that'll be coming. You get the toys 2 weeks earlier than anyone else and directly shipped to your home versus having to go to a Walmart to get them. Or perhaps there's kind of a reward to watch. So, hey, you're part of this community and we're going to give you Barbie tokens for watching this. You have your Web3 identity, and we're going to reward you with Barbie tokens for watching this. And how do you use the Barbie tokens?
Barbs.
The
barbs.
And you get to go to the Barbie website and redeem them for whatever. So lots of ways. And we haven't even started thinking about those applications of attaching Web3 kind of tools and utility to viewing.
Yeah. It's interesting because this raises this bigger question that I think I talked about a little bit with Max Kala and Avery at the live event we did, Avery Akinani in Miami. But this question of, is there something fundamentally rotten about financializing a community too early? And in this context, what I mean by that is like, you want that early community to really be diehards of the project. And I think if you are an indie filmmaker, if you're a film that's worried about having box office success, what you're describing makes sense, because in theory, you're only attracting people who are like really interested in the project. With something like a Barbie movie, I don't know if this model works, because there'd be so many people who would want to buy into the Barbie community earlier because they think they can flip it later, whether or not they really care about Barbie the movie. And like, is there something, how does that play out, right? Like, if you financialize something too early, do you ruin the opportunity for like a real organic community to spring up around it, because all you're going to have are speculators?
Well, there's this, I hear a lot of projects right now talking about sort of the degen kind of community coming in, and really there's a challenge of when a community is taken over by speculators, it can ruin that community, and what's left behind is kind of a wreckage. And so how do you disincentivize that from happening? Like, how do you keep them from saying, hey, we're going to do this thing around the Barbie movie. We don't want these speculators to take up all of the Barb's tokens and then try to start flipping them for profit. So how do you soulbound those? Is there a way to, rewards are distributed very slowly over time? Or are they non-flippable? Is that, there can be, you can issue a supply. They say it's an unlimited supply. You can issue that as the publisher, but you can't do anything with it once you have it other than collect the rewards that come very slowly over time and through participation. Someone will probably figure out a bot to do something with that, but.
And, it's funny because, of course, tokens and Web3 is also trying to solve the reverse problem, which is what Matt Sanders or M Shadows is working on, right? Is like the verified fan stuff. Like, how do you issue tokens to people who are taking activities like listening to your music on Spotify or buying your merchandise or whatever, such that you accrue tokens that mean you get the first crack at buying the ticket, because we know you're a real fan and you're not just a bot speculator trying to flip your concert ticket. So I think Web3 is sort of the solve for that problem as well. But it's more around like, if you tokenize a community early as a means of either bootstrapping that community financially or building this quote unquote army, it gets tricky, because you need to make sure that those are folks who are in it because they're believers, not because they want to speculate on it.
Yeah. Your goal is to reward, is to bring together those who really care the most and to reward them for their support and participation, not to give them something that they're going to flip and then will then turn into some DeFi token.
So we don't have time to do part 2 of this today. So we'll do another episode on this, which is when we talk about distribution and this third rung of the value chain that we're kind of broadly categorizing as development, production, and then distribution. The whole other big channel in distribution are merchandise, which we've talked about a good bit. We talked about Pudgies a number of times on the podcast. So like toys, plushies, publishing. I mean, you've talked to me a lot about like licensing deals. We've talked about it on the show certainly, but like supply chain and distribution of things in a supply chain sense, and how the blockchain can affect that. So I think that'll be, you'll tell me, John, right? I think that's part 2 of our broader conversation around distribution, or distribution is going to be diving into those like ancillary parts of the businesses that well. I mean, you did a ton of that. That's what being, managing franchise at Disney was really about.
We'll call that essentially transmedia distribution. I'm not the biggest fan of the word transmedia, but it's probably appropriate here. But it's
now my brain is boggling. I don't even know what transmedia means, but I'm sure you'll explain it to me. It'll be great.
We'll save that for the next episode.
Okay. Little sneak preview. All right, John. Well, thank you so much as always for joining, and we will see you next month.
All right. Look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.